Okay, good morning. Thank you all for coming this early. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. So what we're going to do this morning, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. What we're going to do this morning is review the assignment that's due tomorrow uh, to describe the influences of the Communist Manifesto in Mexican art. And the purpose of this is to understand some of the political implications of the art, like what is involved in these murals beyond the obvious meanings that we see, to look how the images also reflect a political ideology that many of these artists shared. And the problem is when we talk about Marx and Marxism and communism, these are words that kind of have lost their meaning at this point in time. People don't, especially young people, might not be aware of what these ideologies are all about and what was it that what these artists were striving for. What were they trying to say? Because our references to communism and Marxism in the United States are mostly very, very negative. We think of the Soviet Union, of China, and it's hard to understand how these artists could be proposing something positive with this. So the Mexican Revolution of 1910 finds Mexico in a very sad state where about 80 to 90% of the people are living in a state of virtual peonage, that many of them are living on the haciendas, on plantations, sharecroppers, people working in industrial situations where they're many times forced into labor. So the industrialization of Mexico is also, that was pushed by Porfirio Diaz, was a very stark, almost semi-feudal type of industrialization where people were forced to work very long hours in mainly clothing factories. And we can see that Mexican people, the division of wealth was very, very unequal. That there was a small wealthy class with a lot of poor people. So the ideology that Karl Marx proposed was very inspiring to many who were looking at the revolution when the revolution breaks out, how they were able to overthrow the dictatorship, this one entrenched elite, but only that the power vacuum was taken over by other elites, that other factors, other sectors of the elites were able to take power, even though it was the poor people that were doing the fighting, that were on the front lines with the rifles and marching. The benefits and the power was taken by those who were prepared to step in and assume the administration. And so that very little changed in terms of the economic disparity. Many people were freed from peonage. They were freed from this virtual slavery, but a new reality sets in as they begin to industrialize in the 1920s and 30s, and we see a new form of peonage emerging. So the ideology that Karl Marx proposes becomes something that looks very appealing. The Russian Revolution of 1917 is similar to the Mexican Revolution. It's a spontaneous mass uprising against the Tsar, who is like a king, who controls this vast empire. And we can see uprisings on many levels. We can see not only poor people, farmers, people in the army, shopkeepers, middle-class people, business people, all rising up against the Tsar. But in this case, a group of revolutionaries calling themselves the Bolsheviks are able to step in, led by Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, and propose a new solution. Well, one of the ways to get rid of economic disparity and these huge gaps is to try this Marxist ideology to use this as the guide for building the new society, to get rid of private property, to eliminate capitalism, and to try this new form of economic organization called socialism. So this is what Marx, this is based on the ideas that Marx proposed. And what Marx argued is that capitalism was kind of inevitable. He saw that history is a series of economic progressions based on technology, basically, that groups that controlled technology would create new forms of production which would push aside the old forms and create more efficient ways of producing, which would give them the power to push aside the previous ruling group. So we can see that the hunter-gatherers are displaced by sedentary farmers. The farmers then organize, and we see the rise of a slave system where the farmers will enslave other people to do the work, which gives way to a feudal system, and then later a mercantilist system, which displaces the feudal lords as the mercantile system trade begins to replace conquest and the forms of production used in the feudal age. And capitalism then comes along to replace mercantilism, capitalism where the profit is derived by the capitalist class, which Marx called the bourgeoisie, the owners of the means of production, who would hire workers, which he called the proletarian, to do work and would derive profit from the sale of the goods that are produced. So this was the idea. So what Marx did was write a history of capitalism, a thorough analysis of capitalism, looking at how the system worked. And Marx was not really criticizing capitalism. He was really analyzing how it worked, and he saw that this progression, that the dynamic of capitalism would ultimately lead to its own destruction. That as capitalists continually had to compete with each other, continually had to try to lower costs, raise prices, exploit the workers further and further. The only thing they could do, really, they couldn't get the goods any cheaper. They couldn't run the machines any faster. The only thing they could do to cut costs would be to reduce workers' salaries, which he thought would lead to ultimately a confrontation as the working class would rise up and seize the means of production that capitalism created. So Marx was actually praising the dynamic of capitalism that led to extreme innovation, that led to the creation of new forms of production, new forms of technology, that he felt that in the hands of the people, in the hands of the workers, could be used to benefit humanity instead of profit. So this is something that we see frequently in the Mexican murals. These were ideas that the Mexican artists seized upon and were very interested in. So the idea also is, he said that that all workers are proletarians, that everyone who works for a wage shares a bond. So let's look in the art and let's see if we can trace any of these elements. Let's look at this. Can you see that? Do you see that mural? Can somebody answer me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So this is the arsenal, and this was painted in the Secretaría de Educación, the education ministry in Mexico City, the arsenal. This is a very famous painting, and we see here a group of artists. We see Frida Kahlo, we see a Cuban labor leader. We see Tina Modotti, another artist. We see children handing out rifles. We see workers in the background with the Communist Party flag. Now, what does Frida Kahlo have in her hand? Can anybody see what's in her hand? Those are paintbrushes. So she's holding paintbrushes and passing out rifles. Now, why are artists depicted in this workers' uprising. In the back, in the front, we see industrial workers who are identified by their blue overalls, which was kind of the uniform of factory workers, and the peasants in the white, who are part of the Zapatista movement, the agrarian revolutionaries. So what's going on here? What's the message here? Well, he's looking at the unity of all sectors of society, of workers, as proletariat. So that artists, he's saying to artists that you shouldn't just be these elite intellectuals, these elite artists separated from the workers' struggles, but you need to be a part of it. And your weapons, besides rifles, are your paintbrushes that Frida Kahlo. Again, he's looking at artists as cultural workers, as workers who have to play a part in this larger workers' struggle. So we can see also the use of the space. He's using the space that this is painted on, right? This doorway or this little portal here to kind of encapsulate this. And we can see how this talk about the unity of workers and how working people need to come together in the role of artists. So some of the other paintings, anybody have any questions so far? So how would you approach this assignment? I think an easy way to do it would be to look through the Communist Manifesto and find a relevant passage that is reflected in one of these murals. They can be very obvious ones or more subtle ones. For instance, let's look, let me, so here's, where is it? Flower carrier. There it is. Here's the flower carrier. Can you see that?
Yes.
So what's going on in this painting? Here's this man carrying this huge basket of flowers, and a woman is helping to put them on. Now, how would this be seen as a political message? What's the message here? Could we find an element of the Communist Manifesto in this mural or some influence? Anybody? Well, what are flowers usually for? They're for enjoyment, right? You can't eat them. They're used for enjoyment, for people to enjoy the beauty. They have a spiritual significance. But is this man enjoying those flowers? He sees them as a heavy burden because they've become a product for sale, right? He's carrying those for sale, so that the enjoyment of life has been taken away from him. So as a proletariat, his function to carry these beautiful objects for other people is taken away from him. So this is a kind of an extreme example of economic exploitation, which Rivera is pointing out here again, that kind of the burden that many people face, but at the same time he's showing the strength of working people who are the motor of the economy. He's showing the way people collaborate and work together and struggle. So he's again protagonizing the working class, showing working people themselves for the first time. He's also showing, the way people dress, kind of the daily life of working people that is not recounted in many other places. So is this clear? Anybody have any questions or doubts about what to do? Anybody? You're all very quiet.
Sorry about that.
So
Yeah,
anybody? Go ahead.
it's pretty clear though. It's just basically like you already kind of made it pretty clear with the first example, the arsenal, and just kind of tying in like Karl Marx's theory on proletariats, and then also for like the second one that you showed, just tying into what his theories.
Right, exactly. So give an example, look at the images, find how Rivera was trying to make a political statement. If you look in the Rivera, My Art, My Life, you'll see that he references many of these paintings, and you can hear what he has to say about them, and sort of how he synthesizes his philosophy. So he's a controversial person because he doesn't follow the Communist Party doctrine exactly, and he's kicked out of the party several times because he doesn't follow the party doctrine, and it differs from the Communist Party, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't still believe in the Marxist ideology, and he's pursuing it. And he talks about this in his book. So one of the things that we talked about in the orientation, and I know some of you weren't able to get to it, is the main thing that I talked about is deadlines. So let's say you have an issue in your life that prevents you from turning in the assignment on time. So all you need to do is send me an email saying, I need an extension on the assignment, and you don't need to explain the circumstances. You can just tell me that, and I'll say, okay. So I want to see all the assignments by the end of the semester or the end of the quarter, but I realize that it's really fast paced and many of you have things come up. So you don't really need to give me the whole story. And I get these 5-paragraph discussions of why, someone couldn't do it on time. But I realize you're all adults, you're all responsible, and I really have a lot of respect for all of you for taking the time to invest in this class and to participate. So I want to see all the assignments by the end of the semester. And if you can't do it, let me know. And that lets me know that you're still involved and you're still participating. So that was the main thing that we talked about. And again, communication. So in the discussions, I'm expecting you to post a relevant post, something that references the readings and the theme that we're talking about, and also discuss with each other. And the purpose of the discussions and why I'm encouraging you to read them is that these are related to the essays and to the midterms, but you'll see other people's perspectives, something that you would get in a lecture class in a discussion section. So you're able to see how other people approach these same ideas, and it might give you some ideas for your own work. So that's the whole purpose behind this, right? And I find that some people, you'll see radically different perspectives, and there's really no right and wrong answers to any of these. It's just to try to these are kind of exercises, because art is something very subjective. Two people could look at the same thing and see something completely different. But if you can justify it in some way, and I'm giving you the parameters here to look how Rivera, as a dedicated Marxist and a communist activist who talked about using his art as a form of political education, this was his goal. And how was he doing this in his work? This is what I'm asking you to show. This was a time, the 1920s, where the Communist Party and the communist movements all over all over the world were proposing kind of very radical ideas. In the Soviet Union, here they're creating a society with no private property. And everything, as they're creating this new society, everything is up for grabs. As they're beginning to create the rules of this new society, they're saying, well, let's see, monogamy, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Do we need this? How about the nuclear family? All these different things came into play. And so you'll see that also in Mexico, many of the communist activists, the communist artists, were also discussing these things. Should we follow the bourgeois norms, the cultural norms of creating these traditional family units? And so we'll see in many people later when we look at Frida Kahlo, people using the frame of modern feminism are looking at Frida Kahlo. But I think it's important to look at Frida Kahlo in the frame of what was going on at that time, of how women were liberating themselves in new ways by wearing shorter dresses, or by smoking, or by dancing, and things like this, that these were kind of liberating by breaking some of the norms, breaking some of the cultural barriers. And Diego Rivera in his art also is doing this, trying to break the frame of the bourgeois cultural institutions by protagonizing working people, by showing people who would never be shown in billboards and advertising, poor peasants, looking at and showing their strength, showing their beauty, showing the types of things that they that they do every day. Again, because previously we'd see that most public art was about advertising. Again, and for the first time, they're using this to portray how Mexican people live, what they do, their own history, their own identity, their mythology, all of these things that had been not hidden, but never put in the forefront in public art. So this public art movement, which was supported by the government, is a part of a larger literacy program. Because we can see after the Mexican Revolution, they saw that one of the main tools to liberate people was to educate them. It's one thing to liberate peons from the plantation, but you have to give them the tools to be able to do something else, to develop other skills. So we see a public education program being put in place, the building of schools. They had to rewrite curriculum. So the teachers, this mural that we looked at, the Arsenal, is in the Ministry of Education. So this is very significant in that sense, because this is talking to teachers. This is telling teachers this is what you need to do, and kind of providing the basis and a stimulus for them to create this new curriculum. And we'll talk about this later, about the education program. And also a lot of young women became teachers. People who had fought in the revolution, again, continued this by becoming teachers and going out in rural areas and creating schools and organizing communities. And to this day, we can see that teachers play a very strong role in Mexican society as defenders of the poor and as revolutionaries. And the missing students in Ayotzinapa, in the 43 missing, I don't know if you've heard about this, those were teachers who were part of a teachers' college, which was following this example of creating this legacy of rural teachers who would be continuing this process of organizing in rural areas. We'll also see that Rivera's mural creation in Chapingo. The university is an agricultural university built in Chapingo, outside of Mexico City, to give technical training to Mexican farmers, to the children of peasants. And this continues to this day. And this is where one of the most important murals is, again, paying homage to the relationship between Mexican people and the Mother Earth. And their idea is that by creating these new generation of educated peasants and educated farmers, that they would be able to continue a lot of the cultural traditions. And again, the mythology and all of this that goes along with farming and the relationship with the Mother Earth. So is this clear? Anybody have any questions, comments? You can either turn on your mic and ask, or you can chat here. I'm looking at the chat screen. Anybody?
Yeah, it's clear.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for attending, and I really appreciate your participation and your creative input in the class. So I look forward to reading your assignments on Monday, and let me know if you have any further questions and if you have any doubts. So the other option besides emailing me is we can arrange a one-on-one video conference like this if you need to, if somebody feels that they need more clarification. Okay, ending the meeting. Thank you so much.